The studio lights blazed down on the Good Morning America set, where George Stephanopoulos sat with his trademark composure, his sharp eyes fixed on the guest chair across from him. Today's guest was none other than Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, whose presence had drawn an electric buzz from the live audience and millions tuning in from home. The anticipation was palpable, not just because of Harry's royal status, but because whispers of a fiery confrontation had already begun to circulate online, fueled by leaked snippets of pre-interview tension. George, known for his incisive interviewing style, had prepared meticulously for this moment, his team digging into Harry's recent public statements, his memoir, and the ongoing saga of his rift with the British royal family. The segment was billed as a candid discussion about Harry's new charitable initiatives, but anyone with a pulse could sense that George was ready to pivot into tougher territory. The audience, a mix of curious onlookers and die-hard royal watchers, shifted in their seats as Harry walked onto the set, his smile polite but guarded, his posture betraying a man who knew he was stepping into a lion's den. The camera zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression as the two men shook hands, the air thick with unspoken challenges. George opened with a softball question about Harry's work with Invictus Games, and Harry responded with practiced ease, his voice steady as he spoke about supporting veterans. But the pleasantries were short-lived. George leaned forward, his tone shifting to something sharper, and asked, "Prince Harry, you've been vocal about your family's shortcomings, but some say your public criticisms have caused irreparable damage. Do you ever regret airing those grievances so openly?" The question landed like a grenade, and the audience gasped, sensing the interview was about to take a dramatic turn. Harry's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing slightly, but he maintained his composure, offering a measured response about the importance of truth and healing. Yet George wasn't satisfied. He pressed further, referencing specific passages from Harry's memoir, Spare, where he detailed private family moments, including his strained relationship with Prince William. "Isn't it hypocritical," George asked, his voice calm but cutting, "to demand privacy while exposing your family's inner workings to the world?" The audience murmured, and Harry's face flushed, a flicker of anger breaking through his polished exterior. He countered, arguing that his story was about breaking cycles of pain, not betrayal. But George didn't relent, citing public polls showing declining support for Harry and Meghan in the UK. The exchange grew heated, with Harry's voice rising as he defended his choices, insisting that his truth was necessary to move forward. George, ever the seasoned journalist, maintained his cool, but his questions became more pointed, each one designed to peel back another layer of Harry's carefully crafted narrative. The studio felt like a pressure cooker, the audience hanging on every word as the confrontation unfolded. Social media was already exploding with clips of the exchange, with hashtags like #HarryOnGMA and #GeorgeVSHarry trending worldwide. Harry, sensing the narrative slipping, tried to steer the conversation back to his charity work, but George was relentless, bringing up Meghan's recent comments about their royal family, which had sparked fresh controversy. "Do you think your wife's statements help or hurt your cause?" George asked, his tone neutral but his intent clear. Harry's response was passionate, almost defiant, as he declared that he and Meghan were united in their mission to build a better future. The audience was split as some cheered his conviction, others whispered about his defiance. By the end of the segment, the tension was undeniable, with George wrapping up with a polite but pointed remark about the challenges of balancing personal truth with public perception. Harry left the stage with a tight smile, the weight of the confrontation lingering in his eyes. The internet was ablaze with reactions, some praising George for holding Harry accountable, others accusing him of ambushing the prince. The exchange was already being dissected by pundits, with clips replayed on news channels and debated on talk shows. For George, it was another day of doing what he did best, asking the hard questions. For Harry, it was a reminder that every public appearance came with a cost, a lesson he'd learned time and again but never quite mastered. The fallout from this moment would dominate headlines for weeks, with both men emerging as polarizing figures in a story that refused to fade. As the dust settled from the explosive Good Morning America interview, the repercussions of George Stephanopoulos' confrontation with Prince Harry rippled across the globe. igniting debates that spanned morning talk shows, social media platforms, and even royal circles. The segment, which had promised a discussion about Harry's charitable endeavors, had instead become a masterclass in journalistic tenacity, with George wielding his questions like a scalpel, cutting through Harry's carefully curated public persona. The audience had watched, riveted, as Harry navigated the onslaught, his responses oscillating between measured diplomacy and barely concealed frustration. Offstage, the production team buzzed with adrenaline, aware that they had just captured a cultural moment. Producers scrambled to package highlight clips for immediate release, knowing the footage would dominate the news cycle. Meanwhile, Harry's team was in crisis mode, huddling in a green room to strategize damage control as notifications poured in from media outlets requesting comment. The public's reaction was swift and divided. On X, posts ranged from admiration for George's fearless questioning to accusations that he'd unfairly targeted Harry, with some users calling it a humiliation and others defending Harry's candor. Commentators on both sides of the Atlantic weighed in, with British tabloids framing the interview as Harry's latest misstep, while American outlets praised his resilience under pressure. The heart of the confrontation lay in George's relentless focus on Harry's decision to publicize private family matters, a topic that struck a nerve with viewers who felt torn between sympathy for Harry's personal struggles and discomfort with his public airing of grievances. George had quoted a particularly stinging passage from Spare, where Harry described a heated argument with his brother, William, prompting Harry to retort that context was everything and that his book was about understanding, not revenge. But George didn't back down, asking whether Harry's revelations had deepened the royal family's divisions rather than healed them. The prince's response was fiery, his voice cracking as he spoke of his duty to protect his own family, including Meghan and their children, from the same institutional pressures that had scarred him. The audience was visibly moved, some nodding in support, others skeptical of his narrative. George, sensing the emotional weight, pivoted to Meghan's role in the saga, questioning whether her outspokenness had complicated Harry's efforts to mend fences with the royals. Harry's defense of his wife was unwavering, but the intensity of his response only fueled speculation about tensions within the Sussex camp. Behind the scenes, Meghan was reportedly watching the interview from their Montecito home, her own team monitoring the fallout as hashtags like #Meghan and Harry trended alongside #Macklash. The media frenzy was relentless, with pundits dissecting Harry's body language, his clenched fists, the way he leaned forward when challenged, and George's calculated calm, which some called ruthless. Yet, for all the drama, there was an undercurrent of respect in the exchange. George's questions, while tough, were rooted in a desire to understand Harry's motivations, and Harry's responses, though defensive, showed a man grappling with his place in a world that refused to let him move on. The interview's aftermath saw Harry's supporters rally around him, praising his courage in speaking truth to power, while critics argued he'd walked into a trap of his own making. George, meanwhile, returned to his anchor desk the next day, unfazed by the controversy. His reputation as a formidable interviewer only solidified. The clash had exposed the fault lines in Harry's public narrative, forcing him to confront the paradox of seeking privacy while living in the spotlight. For viewers, it was a spectacle of raw human conflict, a reminder that even princes are not immune to the pressures of accountability. The conversation continued online, with ex-users posting memes of George's piercing stare and Harry's defiant glare, turning the moment into a cultural touchstone. As the weeks unfolded, the interview would be cited in discussions about media ethics, royal privilege, and the cost of personal truth, with both men emerging as symbols of their respective worlds: George, the unrelenting journalist, and Harry, the prince who dared to break free. The Good Morning America interview between George Stephanopoulos and Prince Harry had, by the following morning, become a global phenomenon, its echoes reverberating through newsrooms, social media feeds, and even the halls of Buckingham Palace. What began as a promotional appearance for Harry's latest charitable project had morphed into a public reckoning, with George's pointed questions exposing the raw edges of Harry's ongoing struggle to redefine his identity outside the royal institution. The audience had been glued to their screens as George, with his characteristic blend of charm and precision, dismantled Harry's defenses, asking whether his decision to step back from royal duties had truly brought the freedom he sought or merely traded one form of scrutiny for another. Harry's response was impassioned, his words tinged with both defiance and vulnerability as he spoke of the toll the royal system had taken on his mental health and his determination to carve out a new path. But George, ever the skilled interrogator, wasn't content with platitudes. He pressed Harry on the financial implications of his exit, questioning how he reconciled his criticism of the monarchy's wealth with his own lucrative media deals. The question caught Harry off guard, his hesitation palpable as he insisted that his work with Netflix and other ventures was about storytelling, not profit. The audience sensed the shift, their murmurs growing louder as George followed up with a question about whether Harry's public persona, part rebel, part advocate, had overshadowed the causes he championed. Harry's frustration was evident, his voice rising as he argued that his platform was a tool for change, not a distraction. Off-camera, the GMA crew exchanged glances, aware they were witnessing a rare moment of unfiltered tension. The interview's viral clips spread like wildfire on X, with users dissecting every exchange, from George's arched eyebrow to Harry's clenched jaw. Some praised George for holding Harry accountable, arguing that his questions reflected the public's growing fatigue with the Sussex's narrative of victimhood. Others rallied to Harry's defense, accusing George of exploiting the prince's vulnerabilities for ratings. The British press, predictably, seized on the interview as evidence of Harry's inability to escape controversy, with headlines screaming about his humiliation at the hands of a seasoned journalist. In the US, however, opinions were more mixed, with some viewers empathizing with Harry's struggle to balance personal truth with public expectations. Behind the scenes, Harry's team was in overdrive, issuing statements to clarify his remarks and emphasize his commitment to his causes, while Meghan reportedly reached out to allies to counter the narrative of a public takedown. George, meanwhile, faced his own scrutiny, with critics questioning whether he'd crossed a line by pushing Harry so hard on personal matters. Yet his supporters argued that he'd done his job by asking the questions the public wanted answers to. No matter how uncomfortable, the interview's impact extended beyond the immediate drama, sparking broader conversations about the role of the media in shaping public perceptions of figures like Harry. On X, users debated whether George had been too aggressive or if Harry had been unprepared for the intensity of the questioning. The prince's supporters pointed to his emotional honesty as a strength, while detractors saw it as a sign of weakness, arguing that he should have anticipated the challenge. For Harry, the interview was a stark reminder of the tightrope he walked, every word scrutinized, every gesture analyzed. For George, it was another notch in his belt, a testament to his ability to navigate high-stakes interviews without losing his cool. The fallout continued to unfold, with talk shows dedicating entire segments to the clash, and royal commentators speculating about its impact on Harry's relationship with the monarchy. Some even suggested that the interview had inadvertently strengthened Harry's resolve, pushing him to double down on his mission to redefine his legacy. As the days passed, the narrative evolved, with both men becoming lightning rods for larger debates about privilege, accountability, and the price of speaking out. The Good Morning America set, once just a backdrop for morning chatter, had become the stage for a cultural showdown, one that neither George nor Harry would soon forget.